Let's go through this word matrix, and hopefully I can give you some tips that will make it more user-friendly for you in your classroom. So it starts out with just the full word matrix. I don't actually start there. I'll start on the second slide, and I'm going to remind students what our base element is. It's J-E-C-T, usually pronounced ject, and it means to throw. And I'm going to point out that by itself, it does not make a word. We have to add prefixes or suffixes to make this a word. So let's go ahead and do that. A word that all students will know is subject. So I would, as I'm projecting this, you can do it two ways. You can be explicit and say this is the word subject, or you could ask your students what word do you think this is if you put the two morphemes together. Subject. So if sub means under and ject means throw, it's kind of interesting because when we think about the subject in school, we're not thinking about throwing something under, but the first meaning of the word was like a noun, meaning that a person under the control of someone else, like a king's subject. So I would explain that was the original meaning of the word, and that makes sense. Like you're under someone's control, so a subject. And then later it became a subject in school. So that's something that you can kind of point out to them. And then you can say, well, we can add any of these suffixes to make subjects, subjecting, and subjected. Now, here's what I'm going to point out, that subject has two meanings. When it's a noun, it's like the king's subject or a subject in school. When it's a verb, when you subject someone to something, we pronounce it a little differently. Same spelling, the morphemes mean the same thing, but then the overall meaning of the word is different. And that does make sense to throw under. Like when you subject someone to something, it's like they're usually doing something that they don't want to do. So explain how, kind of have them practice saying both subject, subject. And it's a great time to reinforce or introduce, if you haven't yet, the concept of stressed syllables. And our language is a stressed time syllable. That is what makes spelling so hard. And that's why it's so important to focus on morphemes more than we do pronunciation when we're spelling multisyllabic words. So in subject, subject, where is the emphasis? In subject, it's in that second syllable. In subject, it's in the first syllable. And when it's a verb is when you add the ed and ing and suffix s. You can add all three. But when it's the noun, subject, you can only use s. And it's that different meaning of the s that makes it more than one. So this is just a great, right there, there's a mini lesson right there for you before you go any further, is just talking about that. So we've already made 4 words, and actually more than that if you think about meaning. So double that, right? If I put the common prefix re, we get reject. And re can mean back or again. So if you think about it, it's like throw back. When you reject something, you kind of like throw it back, right? You don't want it. And then we can remind them that, okay, we can also add, since it's a verb, we can also add those suffixes. Rejects, rejecting, rejected. And you can have your students write these words on their whiteboards and, take this time to pause and say, okay, without looking at the letters, just think about the morphemes and write the word rejecting. And literally make it like re plus ject plus ing. Now we have another one where we have some pronunciation shifts. Let's focus first on object. That's usually the one that comes to their mind. And in that, we have the first syllable is the stress syllable, object. And an object is a noun, right? It's a thing. So we have objects. But then if you shift it and the second syllable has the stress, we have object. And again, that's the verb form. The second syllable has the stress. And notice how then, this is another great time to bring up how the O in object becomes a schwa sound. And that is because the stress is no longer on its syllable. And when it's not on its syllable, that O often, if it's not the stress syllable, we'll say you'll say that schwa sound. So again, more great lessons. Object, objects, objecting, objected, and then you can add in that ION, which makes objection, when you have an objection to something. And this is a great time to either remind them or teach them that ION is the suffix. It's not TION. Just a little side note. TION is the syllable, but the actual suffix, the morpheme, is ION, because that T, as you can see, is part of our base element. So when every single time I do a word matrix with ION, I just say over and over again, our suffix is ION. When it's combined with the T from that base element, that's when we get shun. It's that TION together that we pronounce it shun. But a good reminder is words are made up of morphemes, meaning that's how the words are made. And then when we pronounce them, when we say them out loud, that's where the syllables come into play, because it's like how we're choosing to say it. So two different things, but it's just a good little reminder. Might be a little confusing at first, but my students always got it as young as second grade. So objection, that's a fun one, and that's a good one to practice writing that one again. Something I do too is I say, okay, spell by morphemes, and now let's break it up into syllables, which is how we say it, just to kind of show them both ways. Then we have objective. We can make objectionable, and this one we read from left to right. The reason it's here and not down here is because I don't want to make objectable, I want to make objectionable, and so I need to put it next to that ION. We can also make objectively, and again, it goes after that if, so objectively, and we do not drop that E like we do in other cases because this is a consonant suffix, just a little side note. Then we have inject, injects, injecting, injected, injection. And again, have your students spell these words. Have them write out. Let me show you a word sum real quick. What I usually do is I have my students, I'll say a word after we've gone through this, and I'll say, okay, let's write on your whiteboards, write the word sum for injected. And this is what they're going to write. They're going to write IN plus JECT plus, did I say injected? Let's just say I said injected, plus ED. That's the word sum. And then I'm going to say is rewritten as, that's straight from Pete Bowers. Let's write the word injection now. Ready? And we're not going to copy the letters we just wrote. We're going to just spell the word injected. And I'm going to be picturing morphemes in my head, but that doesn't mean I need to copy what I just wrote. So there we go. So we have, that's our word sum, and that's the word. And then I'm even going to reinforce again. I'm going to say underline your base element, JECT, circle your prefix, circle your suffix. I want them to see this word in its morphemes. It's much easier to remember than a string of letters. Now we have another one. This one's so fun because of the pronunciation shift. We have, when you add PRO, how do you read that word if you put it with our base element? Some kids are going to say project, and some kids are going to say project. It all depends on the emphasis. Again, a project is a thing, right? A noun. Project is a verb. So when we can have projects, or we can have projects, projecting, projected, projection, and we can add that OR to make projector, which is a thing that projects things. And that's the picture I use in my posters. That's like my word for projecting, because you're like throwing something forward. You're projecting an image onto the screen. So, and a projector is the thing that does that. So again, have your students write word sums, have your students write the word, and you could even say, okay, I'm going to read a word. Tell me what morphemes I use. Write the morphemes on your board. You could be dejected. You can be ejected, or something can be ejected, or ejecting, ejects, ejection. I don't know if ejector is a word. Maybe it is. Maybe someone who throws you out of a basketball game or something. You can interject. Inter means between. So to get between something. Conjunction is kind of a tricky word. So if you're doing this with younger students, you don't have to do prefix CON. That's one that maybe I would leave out if I was working with younger students. And then conjecture is also obviously a tricky word, but I like to throw in suffix URE whenever I can. And then this is a hard one. We have trajectory. And then here are all of our words. So when I get to this part, something I like to do is then we can either read all the words, like let's read all the pink words, or let's read all the orange words, or I might say a word, have them find it with their eyes, and then write a words on their whiteboards.